when you look at your oil, it's going to be cheaper to change the oil earlier. You go to the tech manual or operator's manual, look at the spec on when you need to change the oil. You're better off changing the oil early than you are late. That doesn't mean you need to go to the extreme. I know a golf course that takes every operator's manual and they go through it. It says change the oil at 100 hours. They change it at 50. It says 50 hours. They change it at 25. They take every recommended manufacturer spec and they cut it in half because they think, well, early is better. Well, too early is going to be very expensive. First of all, you got a lot of extra labor involved. That's expensive. Plus, it's a lot of oil that you're wasting that doesn't need to. The manufacturer has done a tremendous amount of tests to figure out how long will the oil last, and then they move that number back and they put a pretty good margin of error in there. Your oil shouldn't be wore out unless you're running in extreme condition. You're running in super, super hot weather, you're loading it really hard, and you're running it really nasty environment. Then I would change it. But other than extreme conditions, don't change that interval. Change it when they tell you. If you're going to change the oil, always change that oil filter. There are some manufacturers that will say, change the oil, 5,000 miles later, change the oil in the filter. And then change the oil, and then change the oil in the filter. And so if I'm going to change the oil, and I'm going to take 4 quarts of oil out, why do I want to leave 1 quart of dirty oil in there? The whole purpose is to get all the dirt out. Plus, I want the filter to do as much as it can, and if this filter gets too dirty and it just starts going over that spring, I'm dumping completely dirty oil through the rest of my engine the whole time I'm running it.
Is it bad when you dump the filter out, can't get anything come out?
If you do what?
Turn the filter over, nothing will even come out of it?
Not necessarily. Some filters are designed to automatically drain. So it depends, especially if they're upside down, they will actually run themselves back. So if it beforehand never did it, all of a sudden it started doing it, it's probably because the check valve is stuck open and it will allow it to dump back. I would say that most filters, probably at least 70% of them, don't drain back and they stay full. And the problem with not staying full is when I start it, the first thing my oil pump has to do is fill the oil filter before it can go get to those metal particles or metal surfaces that are important to protect. And so most of them don't manufacture it that way. But some are. So I wouldn't be completely surprised on it. Reasons to avoid. Once you've changed the oil, you decide you're going to change it, these are the reasons why you do not want to overfill it. The first one is going to be poor fuel economy. If I overfill my engine oil and the oil pan is too full, what happens is the crankshaft, instead of reaching in and just touching the oil, it actually has to churn the oil. And the more resistance and the more it has to move the oil, the more energy it takes and the poorer fuel economy. Your fuel economy will go down. What's going to happen is, since it's churning a lot more oil, it throws more oil up into your cylinder walls, and typically you're going to burn a bunch of oil until the oil gets down to the proper level, and then your oil consumption will level off. So if you do overfill it, it tends to burn really fast because it's splashed up on the cylinder wall and it burns. The rings can't wipe it off, and they get past the rings and you burn it, which is going to cause your spark plugs to foul. It's going to plug up your valves, and it just does a lot of other bad things. So don't make it a habit. The other thing it's going to be is excessive friction, that crankshaft trying to turn the oil instead of just touching it. Excessive friction. Excessive oil in the cylinder walls. The rings are designed to scrape off a certain amount of oil. It's designed to put so much oil up there, and it can only scrape so much. After that, it just hydroplanes on the oil and actually just goes over it, and then it pumps it up into the cylinder. It goes over it and pumps it up into the engine, and you'll start to burn it. If you get too much oil, it's going to actually blow your seals. You got your main bearings and stuff, and if the oil can't go anywhere, it's going to go somewhere. It doesn't compress, and if you get too much, it just pops the seals out, and then it pukes oil out onto the ground. And the last one, this is on engine without any kind of, without an oil pump. And that goes back to the question you had. This is what we call a slinger. This is on a Briggs & Stratton engine. As the camshaft turns, this little piece of plastic is designed to lube. This is the oil system for this engine. The oil level on this particular application is the top of this pan, which means these little points of plastic actually stick above the oil, and as this spins, I'm not spinning this very fast, and you see how fast it's going. What it does is just flicks oil and flings it all over, and it's directed up into the bottom of the cylinder. It hits the bottom of the piston and runs back down. It cools the piston and lubricates it. And if you first start your engine, it's not going to lubricate everything, but within a couple of minutes, you keep flicking oil around, it'll coat pretty fast. This is a slinger style. The other styles that are out there are dippers. And so these three, this little thing that you asked that was sticking up, these are dippers. And as this piston or connecting rod is traveling around, this little teeny piece of metal dips down into the oil, and actually it's like taking your finger and flicking it. And that's exactly what it, and you think, well, that can't flick very much oil. It doesn't. But at 3,200 RPMs, this thing is flicking an awful lot, and it will splatter it all over, and it's enough to lubricate it. If I overfill it, what's going to happen, instead of reaching down in and getting a little oil and flicking it, all I'm doing is churning the oil. And I actually can have an engine seize because it has too much oil, because it actually loses lubrication. So overfilling it can cause the upper part of your piston to seize, actually from over lubricating it. And so these are three examples, and that's not much of a surface to actually do. This thing actually looks like it's cutting through the oil. And it's designed to flick the oil around, and that's the lubricating system for this engine. This one here is a little better because it actually has a bend in it, and so you'd think, well, that one will actually transfer a little bit more oil than the other ones. You scroll it up.